Asian F.
Am I good?
Right, yeah. Oh, you're perfect.
Okay. Okay, so the first thing we wanted to start with was when people hear the word Asian or Asian American, what's the first stereotype that typically comes to mind, especially on a college campus?
Studious.
Right, exactly. So our research was done on Asian Americans, and I'm just going to read you guys our abstract so you have like a background of what we worked on. Discrimination of Asian Americans is not as prevalently known as many would think within the education realm and society. In many professional institutions of development, Asian American applicants are being overlooked due to practice quotas needing to be met. The increasing demand for the model minorities to get higher test scores on the ACT and ACT places a burden on Asian American applicants to outshine everyone else. Some people may not be aware of the concept of model minority. It has been seen as a stereotype that does not hold true for many Asian groups. Our college is focusing on equality when it comes to the selection process of all college students. If so, then why are race-conscious policies still in place? The general public may not notice these institutions' sly behavior, but Asian American students who desire to be college-bound do, and are paying a price for checking Asian American on their applications. Okay, so our first topic is the Asian F. I'm not sure if everyone's heard of this, but typically what the Asian F is to Asian students or Asian American students. An F to them would be between 80 and 89%, and you can see a C is 90 to 94, a B 95 to 99, and typically 100% is what they want to be considered an A. This isn't always put on typically by like colleges or anything like that, but their parents is what the research has concluded is the parents put a lot of pressure on the students so they can get into Ivy League schools and have good grades and really excel in life. So we found that the parents are who put so much pressure on the students in general. Okay, so this picture right here is a student from Harvard. She was discussed in a news article that had done research on the fact that Asian Americans are discriminated when entering their applications for college. And she, as she considers herself half Taiwanese and half Norwegian, she checked white on her application box. And this was due to her mom was the one who told her that many colleges are discriminating against Asian Americans and that she would be better off checking white in that box. And there was also another girl who was commented on in the article, and she stated, "I didn't want to be written off as another 1.4 billion Americans applying to Harvard." And so she also checked white in her box, and she was not white. She had Asian background. Also, many people who were commenting in the article said that they didn't want to be compared to just Asians. A lot of Asian Americans can be confused for Asians sometimes when they're American-born, and so they didn't want to have the typical, I'm really smart, I can get into school. They didn't want to be compared that way. Okay, so we're going to show you a video. This is from CNN, and this discusses, are Asians really smarter? In a minute. Wait.
Crunch time at Mission San Jose High School in Fremont, California.
The final exam is supposed to be on what, 2 days?
For students like Sid Sriram, it's game on.
Just to see that letter grade, see that A on the paper, it's pretty good feeling.
The kids here are some of the best test takers in the country. Mission San Jose, one of the very best public schools. It's also overwhelmingly Asian.
Lucy Lou? Annie Lou? Thomas Lou?
And its success raises a highly controversial question. Are Asian students smarter?
So when did you come to this school?
In 1972, I started.
When Principal Stuart Q came to Mission San Jose, the school was 98% white. Now it's only 20% white and nearly 75% Asian because of demographic shifts in the Silicon Valley community. Its scores on statewide tests have gone through the roof. What do you think accounts for the high academic achievement at this school?
I think just the changing demographics.
How so?
I think that the Asian population, as they became more predominant in this area, the parents come from a system, they all teach for a test, and that's their biggest thing.
Q says Asian American students consistently outperform their white classmates on standardized tests, and not just here. California's top 5 ranked public high schools are all majority Asian. Nationally, Asian students lead in terms of overall grade point averages. They outscore their peers on the math portion of the SATs and are more likely to take math-heavy classes like physics and calculus. So, those high scores beg the politically incorrect question, are Asians naturally more intelligent?
That's just not on the table. It's not a matter of biology or genetic differences. That we're very clear about.
Stanford cultural psychologist Hazel Marcus notes a distinction between intelligence and academic success. Education is particularly prized in most Asian cultures. Academic success, a child's duty to his family.
It's the most important role. It's your job. It's what you are supposed to do, is to bring honor to the family by becoming educated.
What's more, studies show Asian students take a unique approach to learning, absorbing facts rather than reflexively challenging them.
First comes just making your mind quiet and then taking in the information that's there. Organize it, put it together. Later on there can be questioning.
Anytime we make broad statements about Asian Americans being uniformly successful, it misleads the public.
Dr. Alvin Alvarez says statistics don't tell the whole story and perpetuate the myth of a model minority. Keep in mind, the Asian American classification covers people from well over a dozen countries. Not all nationalities achieve the same levels of success here in the United States. The path of a college-educated immigrant from India or China is very different from that of an asylum-seeking refugee who fled Cambodia or Laos or Vietnam. The model minority myth renders all those distinctions moot.
One, it basically fails to kind of capture the diversity within the Asian American community. Two, it also begins to penalize those Asian American groups and individuals who don't fit that particular stereotype.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm gonna talk a little bit about the model minority myth that they mentioned in the video. And for those of you who don't know what the model minority myth is, it's pretty much a stereotype for Asian Americans that this cultural expectation, that each individual will be hardworking, educated, self-obedient, not complaining, doesn't complain a lot. Pretty much characteristics for a perfect student or an exceptional student. I'm going to go over a little statistics and reasons for why this model minority concept is a myth and why it doesn't apply to every Asian American group. One example that I wanted to mention here was that proves this myth is Chinese Americans or South Asians who have a college degree. At the same time, the number of Southeast Asians are struggling to adapt their lives in the U.S. And this is because even though they're the same, they're Asian Americans, they're in the same group. There are different minority ethnic groups within Asian Americans. So they have totally different backgrounds and experiences, especially coming to the United States, which affects their socioeconomic status and ability to obtain, education and jobs. This is some statistics from the 2000 census. It's a little hard to read the numbers, but it's basically comparing the 8 largest Asian American ethnic groups in the United States. It's from the year 2000. It also compares the major ethnic groups, blacks, Latinos, Hispanics, as well as whites and Native Americans. And I just wanted to go over a few of these just to prove that not all ethnic groups within Asian Americans have the same experiences and the same opportunities. One right here I wanted to go over, these are the percentages of each group. The first one is not proficient in English. So while Asian Indians, which are considered Asian Americans, are at 8.4% of their population is not proficient in English. At the same time, Cambodian, Hmong, or Laotian are at 44.5%, which is completely opposites. They're at the top and they're at the bottom. And it's a lot of reasoning why, because this group of Asian Americans were refugees. So that's a reason why they don't have that language, that education that a lot of Chinese, for example, Chinese or Japanese or Koreans do. Another one, less than high school education for Cambodians and Hmong and Laotian group, which they group into one whole. They're at 52.7%, which is the bottom towards Latinos, Hispanics, even more so. They have the highest percentage that of their population have less than a high school education. Again, where Asian Indians have only a 12.6. The majority of them have a college degree or advanced degree. And that just goes to show, even though they're both Asian Americans, they're at completely opposite sides of the scale. So it just proves right there that this model minority concept does not apply to all of them. And a lot of people think this model minority stereotype, it's something positive, You should be proud of it. It's not a bad stereotype like, lazy or, you're not hardworking. So why do some people look down upon it? Why do some Asian Americans, get offended by this stereotype? And I guess I just mentioned a lot of reasons why, because it does not apply to all of them. Mostly like Chinese and Japanese, they see them in that light, and they tend to ignore these Laotian or Hmong or Cambodians, this Asian American group, that there's not a lot of them, their population is lower, so they tend to go unnoticed. It also can do more damage than good, and I'm going to explain some reasons why. First of all, Asian Americans are under a lot of pressure to perform and conform because of this model minority stereotype. Not just by their parents, but by teachers and educators. They're expected to do well in school. I actually interviewed a few Asian Americans here in the Iowa State campus, and I explained to them with the research on the stuff that I found. And then growing up, they told me about their experiences, and they said, yeah, you hit it right there. That was exactly my childhood growing up. My parents, they expected me, to get straight A's. One female, she's a junior here at Iowa State, she mentioned one incident where in high school, she brought in all A's in her report card. She showed her dad, and he said, this isn't good enough. And that was really that really sort of devastated her. So that's just an example of, it is true. There's all the Asian Americans that I did interview did agree with this whole concept. And I want to talk this picture right here, Truth About Tiger Moms. That whole idea of tiger moms is that of strict parents demanding, good grades, those strict, not letting you go out and sort of things like that. And like I said, they're not only under pressure to perform, but to conform. And many times that causes high levels of stress among these students. And they also have the highest rates of committing suicide. And they're also more likely to report high levels of stress, but they don't seek help. This is a video that I wanted to show you guys on the whole idea of tiger moms and these strict Asian parents.
My mom and dad expect me to set a very good example for my brother and sister and to uphold excellence in academics at school. Right now I'm really tired. This is my room. This is where I'm going to spend most of my time when I'm not in school. This is my sanctuary, my asylum. There is definitely something going on. I'm not sure what though. I'm not going to be able to make it. I was a friend who just called to see if I could do anything today, but I can't go out because my dad won't let me, so I'm just going to stay home and study.
We want her to be happy, but we can't just say, okay, do whatever.
You can't argue with a stubborn Chinese man.
When she said, can I have a party? I said, no, your top priority now is getting into one of the schools.
My mom and dad are pressuring me to get into Yale, Harvard, or Princeton.
Everything else is the lower class.
I know my dad lives vicariously through me.
One of my regrets is I didn't go to one of the elite schools.
He wants me to do so much better than he did.
I'll try my best to send my kids to one of those schools, no matter how expensive they are.
I think my parents are going to restrict me as they've never restricted me before. I'm just going to have a lot more nights where I'm not hanging out with my friends. I'm going to be stuck at home a lot more. It's not my idea of having a good senior year.
So there you saw the whole Tiger Mom idea, and that's something that's very common among Asian American students with their parents. This whole model minority stereotype, not only affects them academically, but mentally, like I mentioned. There's a lot of high suicide rates among Asian Americans. The way they view themselves, as they need to live up to these expectations from their peers and their, educators, and it affects them in a lot of ways. And like I mentioned, it does more harm than good. And some reasons why is because this whole myth groups all Asian. Pretty much they're saying all Asians are the same, all Asian Americans are the same, when that's not the case, and I showed a few examples. It also, like I mentioned, it puts unfair pressures to these students especially, to perform, to be the exceptional student, and it causes them high levels of stress, as I mentioned. Another reason is, with this stereotype, this group of Asian Americans are seen as, they don't need support. They're wealthy. They're educated. They have all these opportunities. They're not like the other minorities that are in poverty. High levels of poverty and things like that. So it tends to situations where Asian Americans go through racism, discrimination. They still go through these, things that other minorities go through, but a lot of times it goes unnoticed. Especially in the media, you see more cases with African Americans and Latinos. They tend to focus more on those minorities than these, because those are seen to be more well off, and they don't need the support. They don't really need the help because they're already good. They're the small minority. They have everything, and that's not the case. A lot of times, with this, it affects them not only with their teachers and peers, but also in getting an education. When they apply to universities, it's actually harder for an Asian American or an Asian they have to score higher on an ACT than other groups, which Andrea's going to talk a little bit about.
Lindsay's going to talk about it.
I mean Lindsay.
Okay, so a lot of information that we found was that when entering into schools, Asian Americans typically need about 140 points higher on their SAT compared to their white students, 320 points higher than Hispanic, and 450 points higher than African Americans to even have a shot at the same college. And they found that typically this is because people just assume them to be smarter, so they need to show better test scores and things like that, which I believe is discrimination, obviously. I think that everyone should have a fair shot. Also, after college, a lot of Asian Americans don't get into bigger positions of when they're in jobs and things like that. So Asian men will typically earn $400,000 less than Caucasian men over an entire lifetime. They don't typically have the opportunities that Caucasian men have, even though they may have the same abilities. Asian Americans make up only 6% of the population, but earn more college degrees than white students. 65% compared to 59%. To me, this is pretty sad that it's a very small amount of the population compared to whites. However, they're still doing more in school, they're still trying harder and coming out on top compared to whites. And at Iowa State alone, there's 3% of Asians and 79% white. So that kind of is just an idea for us here on campus about how sometimes getting into college can be difficult for them, just comparing the percentages that are here. And this is a graph. I know there's a lot of information, but this is Asian Americans alone, and these are your Ivy League schools. So here's Harvard, Yale, and Stanford, and you can see that the numbers that are accepted, say for Stanford, it's 2,400. 23% are Asian. I guess some people can look at that as that's a really good amount. Some people can look at that as that's not a very large percentage. So these are just numbers that just kind of show how difficult it can be for them to get into Ivy League schools.
Now, remember that, and I always say there's only 3%, and then look at Harvard, what they had. It's a huge difference. Now, we have a video, and I apologize in advance for this because it's a little disturbing and kind of annoying at the same time. So I'm going to give you a quick overview before we watch it. This is a student from UCLA that posted this video, and she later on suspended from UCLA, and then a lot of people gave negative feedback to her. You'll understand what I'm talking about once you see it. And then she apologized for it in the end, but I mean, this is what Asian Americans have to go through. They're going through same acts, and I think like Caucasian people may have this idea that they're automatically better than Asians and other minority groups.
Okay, so here at UCLA, it's finals week. So we know that I'm not the most politically correct person, so don't take this offensively. I don't mean it towards any of my friends. I mean it towards random people that I don't even know in the library. So, you guys are not the problem. The problem is these hordes.
Wait, don't touch things.
Of Asian people that UCLA accepts into our school every single year, which is fine. But if you're going to come to UCLA, then use American manners. So it used to really bug me, but it doesn't bother me anymore. The fact that all the Asian people that live in all the apartments around me, their moms and their brothers and their sisters and their grandmas and their grandpas and their cousins and everybody that they know that they brought along from Asia with them comes here on the weekends to do their laundry, buy their groceries, and cook their food for the week. It's seriously without fail. You will always see old Asian people running around this apartment complex every weekend. That's what they do. They don't teach their kids to fend for themselves. You know what they don't also teach them is their manners, which brings me to my next point. Hi. In America, we do not talk on our cell phones in the library. Where every 5 minutes, I will be, okay, not 5 minutes, say like 15 minutes. I'll be like deep into my studying, into my political science theories and arguments and all that stuff, getting it all down, like typing away furiously, blah, blah, blah. And then all of a sudden, when I'm about to like reach an epiphany, overhear from somewhere, oh, Jing Chongling Long Ting Tong? Oh! Are you freaking kidding me? In the middle of finals week. So being the polite, nice American girl that my mama raised me to be, I kind of just gave him what anybody else would do, that kind of like, you know, it's got its library, like we're trying to study, thanks. And then it's the same thing 5 minutes later, but it's somebody else, you know. I swear they're going through their whole families, just checking on everybody from the tsunami thing. I mean, I know, okay, that sounds horrible, like, I feel bad for all the people affected by the tsunami, but if you're gonna go call your address book, like, you might as well go outside, because if something is wrong, you might really freak out if you're in the library and everybody's quiet. Like, you seriously should go outside if you're gonna do that. So, thanks for listening.
Alright, so I've been in the library many times, and it's not just Asians or Asian Americans speaking on their phone. So, just to point that out. Now, I have a little, like, story I will tell you guys. It's happened, and let's just start with this. Have you ever heard there are too many Asians on campus at OS State? Yeah, right? Unfortunately, I've heard that a lot, too. And this issue has been going on for years. In fact, Professor Ling-Ching Wong at UC Berkeley would not only hear comments like that, but then he heard a rumor going out around that admissions started to play dirty and weren't accepting Asian Americans as much as they were the year before. In fact, in 1984, so this is around, let's say, almost 30 years ago, okay?
Before that is
Okay. Asian Americans were not as profitable, quote unquote, as international Asian students. So therefore, why would they want to change their demographics in having the Asians and Asian Americans apart? Because that, of course, would be too many Asians in one university because it's predominantly white. The problem with this is that these Asian American students have been working their butts off to be primed for these universities. So for example, students that were graduating in the top 8% were not being accepted into UC Berkeley anymore. It had to be higher. It kept going higher and higher and higher. And then Wong actually got around to monitor the admissions data and noticed that there was a 21% drop in the number of Asian American students compared to the previous fall semester. So he decided to do some other research about other prestigious universities. For example, Brown, Princeton, Yale, Stanford, and UCLA were also having drops in admissions for Asian Americans. So Wong decided to partner up with other Asian American leaders and activists to fix this problem. UC Berkeley actually didn't budge until media started to shed a light on this predicament. In fact, they had tried to say that the reason that Asian Americans were not being as accepted was because it was overall. There was a 5% student decrease in enrollment this year compared to the previous year. But that didn't make any sense because when he looked into the information, that the only decrease was the Asian Americans. The whites stayed the same, the Hispanics stayed the same, the blacks stayed the same. It was just Asian Americans. So, in fact, the president of the university at the time, his name was David Garner, he was actually quoted, and this did cause an uproar, so just so you know, the overrepresentation of Asian Americans was causing racial disturbances. So then UC Berkeley decided to form a policy to ensure that Asian Americans would be treated fairly in admissions in the future. So in 1991, and this is at least 6 years later, they started resuming and increasing enrollment at a typical pace that they were growing before. It took that long for them to do all this. And I'm done.